Greetings, comrades! Imagine that we're in the 20th century. You are a foreigner who is very interested in the Soviet country and life in it, and you get an opportunity to go to Moscow for a few days. You are thrilled, but after going to the Red Square and visiting Grand Palenin, you realize that you want more. You would love to learn about life in other parts of the USSR, to see how different people are in different republics. So little time and so much to see. If only there was a place where you could learn about the life of the entire Soviet Union in miniature. Well, you are lucky, because there is such a place in the USSR, and it's located, believe it or not, just in Moscow. The embodiment of the Soviet dream, the exhibition of achievements of national economy, VDNKh. So, a little backstory, why I decided to make this video in the first place. One of my subscribers has been asking me for over a year to cover VDNKh under each of my videos. By the way, leave your comments, I read every single one of them. At first I had my doubts, who would even be interested in that? Besides, I first visited VDNKh in the 1990s, and it was a rather depressing place. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that it's not just a park, not an exhibition, not an exposition center, not an open-air museum. VDNKh is a small-scale model of the state, literally a mirror of the country, reflecting its condition with surprising accuracy. The territory of VDNKh has changed its name, size and appearance, reacting to political moods and hardships, wars and changes of epochs. Let us take a look at this metamorphosis. What is VDNKh? Exhibition of achievements of national economy. What achievements? Why gather them in one place? Shouldn't they be everywhere? But the Soviet Union decided otherwise. Today it is one of the 50 largest exhibition centers in the world, visited by more than 30 million people annually. And what was it like 85 years ago? In fact, for the first 20 years of its life, it was not even an exhibition of national economy, but the All-Union Agricultural Exhibition. In 1934, with the 20th anniversary of Soviet power approaching, the Soviet leadership decided to organize a Jubilee exhibition to demonstrate the successes of collectivization. Its construction was initiated by the All-Union Congress of Collective Farmers Udarniks. The main idea of the project was to show the country's achievements of 20 years in a grand way, to prove to ourselves and the whole world that the kolkhoz is a fruitful and progressive thing. It was conceived as a utopia of abundance, much needed after the civil war and industrialization, when there was a relative lull. According to the project, it was to include 7 main sections, from mechanization and electrification to amateur art. Thousands of kolkhozers fought for the right to participate. They exceeded plans, increased norms, and finished 5-year plans in 3 years. As a reward, they could get a car or a motorcycle, a luxury for those times. Vyacheslav Altarzhevsky, the first architect of VDNKh, had the idea to make the exhibition not only the cultural center of the country, but the center of the universe. And the son of this universe was to be a huge 40-meter statue of Joseph Stalin. In the second half of 1935, the construction of wooden pavilions began, but it was extremely slow. In July 1937, only the pavilions of Belarus, Ukraine, the joint pavilion of the Transcaucasian republics and Turkmenistan were completed. Since it was not possible to meet the deadline for the anniversary, the opening was postponed for a year. These delays had dire consequences. Chief architect Altarzhevsky was arrested, accused of sabotage, and exiled to Vorkuta for 5 years. Could one keep the pavilions built by a traitor and saboteur? So the built pavilions were demolished and a new opening date was announced, August 1st, 1939. But the new architect Chernyshov preserved the main idea. In front of the pavilion dedicated to the success of mechanization, he quickly assembled a 25-meter statue of Stalin from reinforced concrete blocks. Chernyshov also transformed the entrance pavilion to the main pavilion, where the composition demonstrated all the advantages of the Soviet village over the squalid Tsarist one. Fat cows looked at the visitors from photographs, and graphs and charts proved the superiority of collectivization. Visitors were immersed in the life of a collective farmer. They fed animals, witnessed heroes of labor milking cows, and saw an unprecedented variety of products. The main pavilion was crowned by a 50-meter tower with the symbol of the exhibition, the sculpture, tractor driver and kolkhoz woman. In 1939, the number of collective farm women increased to 2. After the return of Vera Mukhina's monument worker and kolkhoz woman from the international exhibition in Paris, the government decided to place the composition at the entrance to the park. In total, the 136-hectare complex includes about 250 buildings, a cascade of ponds, fountains, parks and experimental plots. One half of the pavilions was dedicated to the republics of the Union, Kazakhstan, Armenia and others, and regions, Far East, Soviet Arctic. The second part was devoted to agricultural sectors, mechanization, horticulture, sericulture. The style of each building combined powerful Stalinist empire style with national motifs, and each pavilion reflected local peculiarities. For example, Volga region was built in the form of a steel bridge over the Volga River, and the windows of Azerbaijan were decorated with carved wooden grids with multicolored glass. The exhibition was seasonal. It was possible to visit it only in the warm season. In the 1930s, Ostankino was a suburb of Moscow, so bus and trolleybus line had to be built for visitors from scratch. In just 2 months of the exhibition in 1939, it was visited by 3.5 million people. With the outbreak of the Great Patriotic War, the exhibition was closed for 5 years. Part of the stuff went to the front, and some exhibits were sold to finance the army. The empty pavilions housed workshops of the military repair plants, barracks and warehouses. The pavilions decayed, the territory was overgrown with grass and bushes. But already in 1948 the active reconstruction began, and in 1954 the exhibition was reopened with a completely changed post-war architecture. From now on, grandiosity became the official style. The country needed a visual demonstration of its status as a victor over fascism. The critics, however, saw it differently. While half the country was huddled in barracks, in the midst of hovels and mud, here solemn, ornate and insanely expensive monuments of the coming communism were growing. The pavilions turned into palaces and temples, and the exhibition became a city of dreams, a city of the future, a living testimony to the coming of communism. VDNKh began to look like a kind of a palace and park complex. Russia's Peterhof, France's Versailles, Austria's Schönbrunn. In 1954 nobody was building these anymore, except for the USSR. Interestingly, this territory originally belonged to the Sheremetev's family, who built a palace here. So VDNKh was like a continuation of this historical tradition. The most important buildings were placed along the central axis: the main entrance, the main pavilion, squares and the mechanization pavilion. Other buildings were built to the right and left of this axis. Behind the main pavilion 3 majestic golden fountains were built: Stoneflower, Golden Spike and of course the Fountain of Friendship of Peoples, a new symbol of the exhibition. A round dance of the Soviet republics in the form of 16 kolkhoz girls in national costumes. By the way, one girl soon became superfluous. After the abolition of the Karelian Finnish SSR in 1956, there were 15 republics. The fountain was not changed, however. At the same time, the arc of the main entrance was built, on top of which the sculpture Tractor Driver and Kolkhoz Woman was placed. By the way, here are the sculptures from 1939 and 1954. See the difference? Yes, the tractor driver took his hand off the kolkhoz woman's waist. Apparently, a Soviet man was not supposed to engage in such things at work, but hold the sheaf firmly with both hands. But with Stalin's death, everything changed. Everything that was related to him was now condemned, including the old version of VDNKh. The statue of Stalin was removed back in 1951 for renovation, but never came back. Grandiosity was hidden behind ascetic facades, and Khrushchev wondered, why should we demonstrate the achievements of agriculture of the republics and talk about the harvest of cotton in the center of Moscow? The exhibition changed its name. The All-Union Agricultural Exhibition became the VDNKh, and the pavilions of the republics and agricultural sectors became pavilions of scientific achievements. Thus, Kazakhstan became metallurgy, the Armenian SSR food industry, Volga region radio electronics. It was covered with aluminum sheets and stylized as a box of a huge radio receiver. However, the Soviet leadership raised the bar very high, so it went without saying that it was still necessary to show all the most amazing things at the renamed VDNKh. Each pavilion not only contained some kind of exposition inside, but was itself an exhibit. For example, pavilion number 62, Building Materials, was designed to showcase the achievements of the Soviet construction industry, but was actually an exhibit itself, demonstrating new technologies. The central 60-meter cube was made of faceted blocks of tempered glass, Stalinist, which allowed light to pass through the wall into the entrance hall, giving the impression that the roof was floating in the air. Heating was also unique, with ceramic sections heated in aromatized oil, which were lifted into the air and gave heat to the room. The second half of the 1950s was a time of openness. In 1957, Moscow hosted the World Youth Festival. In 1959, it was planned to hold industrial exhibitions of the USSR and the USA in each other's territories. There is an opinion that the anticipation of the visit of the Vice President of the United States, Richard Nixon, to Moscow was the main reason for such a large-scale and rapid reorganization of the exhibition after Stalin. Now it was necessary to demonstrate to the Western countries as clearly as possible the main achievements of the development of the Soviet economy as a whole, not of agriculture or its individual regions. The centerpiece of the renewed exhibition was the same pavilion number 62. Now the Atomic Energy Pavilion, where visitors could watch the workings of a real nuclear reactor and the bluish glow of the peaceful atom from a viewing platform through a 4-meter-thick column of water. A little later it was time for space. The Mechanization Pavilion was rebuilt. A copy of the Vostok rocket was placed on the empty pedestal from the Stalin statue. Inside the pavilion there were stands devoted to the development of rocket technology, models of artificial satellites, lunar rovers, life support systems for cosmonauts, and even a real spaceship descent vehicle. Thousands of people from all over the Soviet Union and the countries of the socialist camp came to see the achievements of the USSR on the wave of great interest in everything related to space. Despite endless changes and reorganizations of the VDNKh, the main purpose of its existence, propaganda of the latest scientific and technical achievements of the USSR, remained unchanged. For people from the farthest corners of the country, visiting the VDNKh, especially in the 50s and 60s, was like visiting another planet, the planet of victorious communism. Fun fact: there was a fee to enter the exhibition, not pavilions, but the territory itself. Only 30 kopecks, less than $1, but the fact is that you still had to pay to see the achievements of your own socialist country. And now, under damned capitalism, it is free. The history of the USSR's VDNKh ended with the history of the Soviet Union. Since 1990, the budget financing was stopped. From now on, everyone had to find their own ways to generate income. After the collapse of the USSR, the park was renamed to the All-Russian Exhibition Center. The management had to start renting pavilions and other structures. This change caused serious damage to the exhibition. Many pavilions were partially destroyed. The exhibits of the Cosmos Pavilion are considered the most significant loss. In the 90s, the building was used for large-scale raves, and then for selling everything from cars to seedlings. The Tu-154 Airplane Museum was dismantled for metal. The water supply to the fountains was cut off. The unique circular cinema panorama, a movie theater with a screen on all sides where you have to stand up to watch movies, was closed. The exhibition practically turned into a bazaar. Instead of state records, there were tents with video cassettes, sausages, household appliances, and dried fish. Most of the buildings were in state of disrepair. The stucco and bas-reliefs of the buildings were hidden under plywood with 1 million advertisements stuck on them. Yes, this is how I first saw VDNKh. In 2005, the pavilion Hunting and Animal Breeding burned down. In 2011, the pavilion Veterinary Medicine with unique paintings by Vladimir Favorsky. This continued until 2013, when Vladimir Putin handed over the complex to the Moscow government, and VDNKh got its historical name back. A major restoration program began in 2014. 3 years were spent on landscaping, emergency repairs, and eliminating illegal trade. The pavilions were restored to their historic appearance and meaning, representing industries, regions, or friendly neighboring countries such as Belarus, Kazakhstan or Uzbekistan, which now rent pavilions of the same name. In 2024, 25 museums were operating in the pavilions. In the Cosmos Mechanization Pavilion, the Cosmonautics and Aviation Center opened in 2018, becoming the largest space exhibition complex in the country. In the Ukrainian pavilion, the Slovo Center of Slavic Script was opened. Some pavilions have changed their formats. For example, in the above-mentioned pavilion number 62, Construction and Nuclear Energy, the International Ballet Center was opened. New facilities have also been built in the VDNKh. For example, Moskvarium, the largest non-coastal oceanarium in Europe, the largest Ferris wheel in Europe, Sun of Moscow, 140 meters, cable car air tramway, 769 meters. Finally, on November 4, 2023, the International Exhibition Forum Russia started at VDNKh. It was opened, of course, by Shaman. Who else? The Russia Forum presented the best projects and the most significant achievements of the country in the 21st century in various sectors, including industry, energy, agriculture, transport, construction, science and culture. However, for Muscovites, the VDNKh is now primarily not a place of achievements, but simply a popular public space, a place for leisure and recreation with the family. So, what about the mirror? You see, VDNKh was constantly transforming itself in parallel with the changes in ideology, aesthetics, style and society. The 30s were the time of collectivization, when it was necessary to show all the successes of our young Soviet country. We built a garden city with the leader Joseph Stalin shining in the center. However, it turns out that there are traitors everywhere, so we quickly arrest them and redo everything. And yes, all the pavilions were designed to be temporary, like the barracks where the most Soviet citizens were living while building a great country. After the war, we are the winners. Let everyone see that things are still better than ever in the war-torn country. Let's urgently build palaces and giant golden fountains. 50s. Out with Stalin, the country is on a new path. But let's not forget that we have to show the damned West who's the boss here. 60s. Space is king. 70s. Stagnation in the country, stagnation at VDNKh. Logical for the USSR in miniature, but it continued. 90s. Priceless Soviet exhibits are just rotting away in warehouses, and on the vacated areas there is an endless and uncontrolled trade of everything. The market has won. At the same time, in the same 90s, the first and only monorail in the country was built through the VDNKh. No, it's cool, of course, innovations, advantages of capitalism, but why? Also a reflection of the era of the controversial mayor of Moscow, Yuri Lushkov. Finally, in the 2010s, the state again realizes that it needs to show its face and reorganizes the exhibition in accordance with the original message, to demonstrate the country's achievements to its own and foreign citizens. A return to traditional values. A huge Russia exhibition dedicated to all regions of the country is opened. Just as 85 years ago, the first version of this exhibition was dedicated to the achievements of each individual republic. And when you walk through the VDNKh today, everything around you is very beautiful, very well organized. But like a mirror, it leaves a double impression. The exhibition has been modernized. Everything around it corresponds to the spirit of the modern metropolis that is Moscow. The pavilions and museums now tell about the most recent achievements of the country, but at the same time it is as if they offer nothing new. Everything you see around you is the same as it was in the Soviet Union, only slightly modified. But maybe that's the point. Thanks for watching, and as always, a huge shout out to my biggest supporters: Елизавета Zakharova, Kirill Klimuk, Zeman Berze, Jimmy Albin, Petr Ilich, Marina Holiday, and one more member who wished to remain anonymous. See you guys next time.